This episode is brought to you by Bulletproof Script Coverage, where screenwriters go to get their scripts read by top Hollywood professionals. Learn more at covermyscreenplay.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Mick Hurbis-Cherrier. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and you did perfectly.
I thank you. I mean, it was I wanted to make sure I got that name proper and didn't massacre, so I'm glad I did. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be on your show. I've seen a number of your podcasts, and I think that we have a kind of a similar mission. You know, we love films. Mm-hmm. We love good films. We want to make sure that good films continue to be made. Mm-hmm. And so we're informing people what is a good film? What makes a good film? How do you make them?
Yeah, exactly. And it is a mystery because they're becoming less and less nowadays. It's not as easy to, when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, I mean, there were so many masters at work during that time period, and many of them are still at work. And every time I'm like, oh, that was a great movie. I'm like, who made it? I'm like, oh, someone from the 80s and 90s. Yeah. But not to say that they're not amazing artists doing work today. I mean, look at Chris Nolan. I mean, look at Fincher. I mean, these kind of guys who came up. Well, the Fincher came up in the 90s, but Nolan and those kind of guys, they're newer generation. There's so many great filmmakers and screenwriters nowadays. But it's harder to find. But it's harder to get them made, and I think that's the biggest problem is there's a lot of great scripts out there, but there's not a lot of great scripts that are being given the opportunities that they were given in the 80s, 90s, and even in the early 2000s. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, I think it's much harder. Obviously, it's harder to sell a spec script, these days. Even if you have some sort of property that's an interesting property, what I've noticed recently is that so much depends on the team you put together, because that makes a production company feel more comfortable and more safe that this is a team that has a track record. They know how to put this thing together. They recognize good stuff. I like the stuff that they've done. And they don't necessarily feel like they're taking a big chance. Because, everybody's job all the way up the ladder is on the line.
And it's just always to say no. Their job is to say no. As much as they might want to say yes, their job is to say no because the whole town is run by fear. Yes. The entire town.
Although, interestingly, I just before COVID hit, I went on a pitch session to a number of different production companies. Their job is to say no. They don't like to say no.
They don't.
Because they don't want to be the person who said no to the thing that got made. So they're always very positive. And then you kind of lose them, I'm telling you, Alex, I was at a pitch session and it went well. We pitched, there were three of us pitching. It went spectacularly. It was for a television program. Mm-hmm. And the producer jumped out of his chair and said, okay, what we need to do is get money for you guys to write the pilot and get a Bible together. And I was like, my God, is it true? The first person we went to, we sold the show in the room. And so I walked out and I talked to the person I was writing with, who's much more experienced than I am in some of these things. And I said, that was an amazing response. That he just said yes right away. He said, oh, no, that's not a yes. That we don't know what that is.
No, I mean, I've never, LA and Hollywood in general, it's an art form of how they say piss off. I mean, it really is artful in the way that they give back negative critiques. But they do it in such a way that you don't even know that you're just being told to just screw off. Because they don't want to be the person. So this is the two fears. I don't want to be fearful enough to green light this and then it bombs, I'd lose my job. I don't want to also pass on the next big thing when they find out about it and I lose my job. So it's all about losing my job. So what's the bigger fear? And generally speaking, the bigger fear is to produce something that bombs because that's more concrete. Yes. So that's why they say no, but they don't want to say no. They want your project to be the next big thing. They want it to make $1 billion and to launch a franchise and all that kind of stuff. But that's just the way the world works. But
it's kind of a vice. It's kind of a squeeze for them because, they need new content. They need new makers. They need fresh ideas. They need people who are good writers. They need these things. It's the lifeblood of the industry. But they are, afraid of making some wrong choices. So that's sort of the thing that keeps people going, is that, they need talent.
But I would argue that everything you just said really focuses mostly on television now, as opposed to features. Features, if you notice, are not new ideas. They're all based on existing IP, especially at the studio level. Indies are different, but indies are going the way of the dodo. They really are, in many ways. It's not as robust of a business as it was in the 90s, because in the 90s, I was speaking to some filmmakers from that era, and they said the reason why my film got picked up was because there was a business starting to come around, VHS, home videos, then DVDs. There was an actual industry, a business way to make money with films like Slackers and Clerks and El Mariachi. And there was a business that infrastructure doesn't exist now, because there's so much competition now for it. That it's for features I'm talking about, but for television, it's all about original ideas. It's completely about original ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, because there's no way you're going to get a if you're not a known writer, there's no way you're going to get a commission for a feature film. It's just not going to happen. But and there's no way you're going to get money for a pitch or a treatment or something like that to develop it. In television, that still happens. Because it's the Wild West. Like, which of these, billion platforms, streaming platforms, are going to survive? And in order to survive, they need new content. They need original content. And so they're out there looking for that stuff. And, I also think, Alex, a young filmmaker these days, or a young writer, somebody who wants to be a writer or a filmmaker, does have to think globally in terms of cinema, because there's still those pathways for interesting feature films happening in international co-productions. And sometimes that's the avenue to open some doors in Los Angeles, even if you want to go there. I have a very good friend, Sami Zawabi, who is a Palestinian Israeli, fantastic filmmaker, wrote a screenplay in English, though it's supposed to be in Hebrew and Arabic. Tried to get it done here. Nobody would pick it up. And then he went to France. And French producers were interested. They got together with, it was like France, Israel, and Luxembourg. And that was the co-production. That film did extremely well. It's a wonderful film. It's called Tel Aviv on Fire. Fantastic film. And now, when he goes to Los Angeles, people know him. He's created his own, I'm not going to say brand, but he's sort of developed a profile that people now can recognize and feel comfortable with. So, and he's on his way.
Yeah, and that's another thing. A lot of people think the only place you can make it is Hollywood, but they would be wrong, because there's such more of a global marketplace than it was in the 90s and the 80s and the 90s. Even in the early 2000s, it wasn't as a global place because the internet hadn't really taken hold yet.
That's
and
right.
It really, and I know people listening like it's a bunch of old farts talking here, but but I remember logging into Netflix and looking at what they had to stream. I'm like, oh, this is all garbage. Like, it's just complete. Before they had anything, it was like, oh, it's complete garbage.
I remember going on Google and thinking, you can't trust any of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. This is all horrible. This is horrible. Yeah. So, but because of the infrastructure that has been built over the years now with the streaming services, the world. Look at Squid Games. I mean, look at a show like Squid Games that showed up. Like, I haven't seen a Korean-based television show ever in my life. Yeah. And when I only watched it purely because I kept hearing everybody talk. I'm like, have you seen Squid Games? Have you seen Squid Games? I'm like, what is this? I got to watch it. And it became one of the biggest shows in Netflix history from Korea. Not from America, but from Korea. Korean.
This is just after I can't remember the title offhand. The Spanish heist film.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, there was that.
Yeah. Again, out of nowhere, not particularly popular in Spain,
right?
But a huge hit for Netflix.
Another huge. So there's a lot of those kind of things. So international, and there's also opportunities internationally that they're just not here. in the U.S. because there's just everybody's here.
Yeah.
But if you go to France and have a France, Israel, Luxembourg co-production, the amount of competition you have in Europe is a lot less than you have here to make films, especially of a certain kind of genre and so on. But I was going to ask you, how did you get started in this insane business?
Wow. Get started in, sometimes I feel like I have 3 full-time jobs. I love writing screenplays. I write screenplays. I don't relish, sacrificing a lot of things for years in order to break in, I also, since the time I was a kid, I wanted to be a college professor. That was a goal of mine. Even before films, that was a dream of mine. My father was a college professor. My mother was a teacher. My sister's a teacher. My brother's a teacher. So it's in the family. So I always wanted to be a professor. Cinema, and then of course my third job are the textbooks, which I sort of stumbled in more recently. But I really love writing these books. It's really a lot of fun. Cinema kind of came into my life very early on. I'm an American citizen, but I grew up overseas. I was born in Izmir, Turkey. I've been in Colombia. I've been in Puerto Rico. Really, where I grew up was Singapore. Mm-hmm. And so 2 things. And so this is from the age of 8 to 13, and this was most of the 70s that I'm living in Singapore. And so the Shaw Brothers were all over the screens in Singapore. And my brother and I would just go to Shaw Brothers productions. Every, kung fu movie that came out, we were there. And we could not speak Chinese at all. Did not matter. Yeah. So all those films with those great titles like Blind Swordsman, The Blind Adventure, The Sentimental Swordsman, The One-Armed Swordsman, 5 Deadly Venoms, 5 Fingers of Death, whatever.
Amazing titles.
Them all.
Yeah.
And of course, any Bruce Lee.
Sure, of course.
So that was one side, and then on the other side, being an American and having never lived in America, have never been to the United States, I was obsessed with absorbing any American culture I could. And so when films came, when U.S. films came, even though they were heavily censored, I would have to see them. Soylent Green, was a big film. In the Patton was a big film. Any James Bond film, The French Connection, The Exorcist.
Oh Jesus!
Even though it was it was practically cut in half, by censors.
It was a short film. It was a short film by the time it got to you.
But they still had the ambulance, in the parking lot, promotional thing going on.
That's amazing.
And then The Sting was one of the great films. I must have seen that 15 times. I love that film. And then at one point I saw a film called MASH, Robert Altman's MASH. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I wanted to see it is because I knew that there was American football scenes in it, and I was just obsessed with American football. Mm-hmm. So I went, and I remember, I must have been 11. And I remember thinking, this film is making me feel funny. I don't know what it is. I don't quite understand what's going on, but it's not like The Sting at all.
Sure.
I think that sort of started my whole love affair with films, and films that does kind of push the envelope was right there.
All right. Now, you've been teaching for many, many years. What is the biggest mistake you see screenwriters make, or at least young screenwriters make?
Young screenwriters? Well, struggling with the language and struggling with formatting and stuff like that, I don't consider that mistakes. That's just the way it goes. And, young writers, I teach at Hunter College, and so not all of my students are young. So when I say young writer, I mean an emerging writer.
Yeah, exactly. A starting writer.
I think one thing is the lack of patience to develop their craft. They watch movies. They feel movies deeply. and they know how to write. Therefore, they feel ready to write a magnum opus immediately. And you wouldn't feel that way listening to music, thinking I'm going to sit at the piano and write a great song, though I don't know how to play the piano.
Right.
But with film, because we know language and we use words and we can write, somehow they feel like what comes out right away has to be great. And I tell them to, and it's because they're fueled by passion. And so I tell them, relax a little bit, write a lot, write, your first few scripts are not going to be that great, I guarantee you. But you will learn from those scripts, and you will get better and better. It's like anything. It's like playing a guitar. It's like Stephen Curry shooting 3-pointers. It looks absolutely easy and effortless. When I watch Stephen Curry shoot 3-pointers, I think I can do that. That's easy.
It looks so easy.
It looks so easy, but the amount of drilling and training and practicing that he's put into those shots in his life makes them look so easy. So, so that's the thing. I give them the opportunity to, I allow them to be patient with their own progress. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel too that a lot of, and this is definitely it was definitely me when I was starting out, there is that little thing called ego. That also creeps in, and everyone's like, wait, I've just written my opus. Why hasn't Hollywood seen my genius? And the trucks of money are just dumped in my front yard. Like, I don't understand. And that ego, like many filmmakers and screenwriters walk into the business for the wrong reasons, meaning I want to be rich and famous, or I want my ego stroked, I want to be on the red carpet and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I always tell people, because I've been around the block a little bit and I got some shrapnel, I just go, there's like, what are we going to do about Bobby? I'm like, don't you worry. The business is going to take care of Bobby. It's not a problem at all. Bobby's going to be just fine. The other hammer is going to come down any minute now. And if it doesn't come down any minute, it's going to come down in 5 years when he's still hustling and going, wait a minute, maybe what I'm doing is not working. And I always try to warn people about that pitfall, because when you're young, you do things like that. You just like, yeah. Obviously, it's like you watch Reservoir Dogs and you're like, I couldn't do that, and then you sit down and go, wait, why is my dialogue not as snappy?
Or even worse, you start doing that again, and it's already been done.
But you're not even doing it again well. You're doing it again. Yeah, it's derivative. So in other words, and by the way, how many? I mean, for us at a certain age, when Pulp Fiction came out. Yeah. How many Pulp Fiction ripoffs came out within the next 3 or 4 years? It was just constant pulp, and you could see the writers of those movies trying to emulate the tone and energy of Quentin, and that's not possible. It's because there's only one Quentin, there's only one Sorkin, there's only one Shane Black, there's only one Chris Nolan. These people are so specific with the way they write that you can't emulate them, and you shouldn't, because it's like me trying to emulate Hemingway. Right.
And also, Sorkin wouldn't make a Scorsese film, though he might adore Scorsese. He knows better than to try and make a Scorsese film, because only Scorsese makes a Scorsese film.
Yep.
I've been teaching long enough that I see it in waves. I remember when everybody wanted to be David Lynch, and then I remembered when everybody wanted to be. His first name is escaping me. Kaufman.
Charlie Kaufman.
Charlie Kaufman. That was another wave.
Oh God! Can you try to write like Charlie Kaufman? Can you write like Charlie Kaufman? Are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Are you kidding me?
That was the era when I couldn't sell 3-act structure to save my life.
Right. Exactly. Tarantino and Kaufman just screwed everything up.
Anyway, and I think there have been others, of course, but I actually think that that's going away significantly these days, because it's a very interesting challenge for teachers and because there isn't anymore that I can see a common lexicon, a common grouping of films that most of the students in the class have watched. I'm seeing students breaking apart into much smaller niches. Some of them love the long form limited series television. Some of them are into Asian film. Some of them are into animated films, really in a big way. Some of them are into the narratives that go into video games. And they inhabit those niches with great passion. So you mentioned, you mentioned Chinatown. Nobody's seen Chinatown.
No.
Right. You mentioned there's a few films that have stuck around that you can still.
Godfather, maybe.
Godfather, The Fight Club.
Yeah.
Interestingly, The Graduate, and I.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Once asked my class, like, why do you all know The Graduate if you don't know,
Chinatown?
And they say, oh, because it's plays all the time on television. So they eventually catch it. So anyway,
you're absolutely right, because coming up there's a group of films. There's like 100 or 200 films that everyone's seen, and it's very comfortably everybody understands. You've seen Goodfellas, you've seen most of Scorsese's work. You might have not seen After Hours, but you definitely saw Goodfellas. You might have not seen Last Temptation of Christ, but you probably saw Casino. Like there's a handful of movies of from directors and of writers but in today's world, when we were coming up, there were less films to watch. We would get maybe 20 movies a year.
That's
25 movies a year. Now we get 20 movies an hour
exactly.
released.
And everybody knew like what the Oscar nominees were.
Oh!
Everybody had seen them and the winners. And so I could go into a class and say, all right, here's an example. And everybody would understand that example. These days I say, here's an example. And I see like blank faces. That's the challenging part of teaching. The good part is you can show them a film like Ed Wood and blow their minds. You know what I mean? Because nobody's seen it before, and they think, "Oh my God, how do you know about this stuff?" You can show them Raging Bull, and they're like, "Oh my God, I never imagined." I had this experience the other day. I was talking to these 3 students who are working together, and their film has some resonance with Wings of Desire. And I said, of course you guys have seen Wings of Desire. Never saw it, never heard of Invenders.
Did they see City of Angels at least?
No. So, they watched it and they called back and they said, Professor, you just changed our lives. I thought, well, that was easy.
Because you're right, and I've even seen that when I talk to filmmakers sometimes, like that movie that this, like I was when I was color grading back in the day, I was working with one of the biggest music video directors in the world at the time, and I'm color grading one of his music videos. I'm like, oh, so do you want me to do this like very like Blade Runner-esque? And he's like, what's that? Yeah. And I'm like, you're a music video director? You've never seen Blade Runner? Are you kidding me? I felt like slapping the guy.
Don't you know you wouldn't even exist as a music video director without Blade Runner?
Without Ridley? Without Ridley in general?
Let alone all that jazz. Bob Fosse's all that jazz. But
exactly.
Anyway, I think I only got to one of the main mistakes. I think you asked me for 3.
No, it's just one of the biggest mistakes. But can you discuss a little bit about how I think one of the biggest things I've seen when I read screenplays from younger or newer writers is their use of description, and the concept of a sea of white is seeing as much white as possible and what that experience is as far as screen. Because honestly, I think it was Shane Black. I think when Shane Black showed up, he made the reading a screenplay experience like reading a book, like reading a novel. His descriptions were so tight, so small, but so descriptive. It was an enjoyable read. And that's when I think we began to think about, as this industry, like the script needs to be enjoyable to read and also not have blocks of description that are for like, it's not a novel. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, a screenplay is a very complicated type of manuscript, dramatic manuscript, because it has a technical function as a blueprint for production.
Correct.
It also has to present to the reader as a movie-going experience. But it also has to be a good read in terms of its language. And it has to contain some of the attitude of the movie, the tone of the movie, the genre of the movie in its language. And this is kind of the more advanced level of screenwriting. And we're seeing people more and more understanding that you can push rules of screenwriting.
Oh, yeah.
You can push some of the things in order to have a dramatic effect or in order to develop a voice. I mean, I was just reading the screenplay for Booksmart, which I have to say was a great, fun read. They break the rules all over the place because they really want to communicate the attitude of the movie, and they really do. I tell my students, and I try and do this, to be vivid and pithy at the same time. And part of that means you have to know language. You can't use lazy language and be right in a vivid way and in a visual way, which means that writers need to read. And that's like number 2 problem with beginning screenwriters is that they want to write, but they don't read. And you're not going to get what you need by watching the film. If you read the scripts and there are a lot of great scripts out there that they can read and they can see exactly how this writer presented the material so that the reader and the director sees it in a visual way. I go back to people like Lawrence Kasdan, who I had a workshop with when I was a student, was one of the first people who really talked about this in any way. And of course, Paul Schrader was another one who was a phenomenal writer. It's funny. I helped with the republication of a bunch of books by Edward Dmytryk, and I worked on screenwriting, and I read some of his screenplays, and it's just not interesting to read. It's kind of like, okay, here are the shots, and it genuinely was a blueprint for a film, and rather than a good read on the page. I think that, and in fact, this is the book that I'm currently writing. I'm writing a screenwriting book, you think, oh man, not another freaking screenwriting book.
There's like 3 of those out there. There's not that many.
All right, so this actually has nothing. This actually has nothing to do. I don't talk about structure. I don't talk about building character. I don't talk about subplots, or I don't talk about any of that stuff. This is kind of a style manual. The first half of it is the proper way of writing a screenplay. It's kind of like learning a language. You learn French. You got to learn the proper way of speaking French in French 101 and French 102. Then you go to France, and people are saying something else.
Of course.
It's the same experience as screenwriters. They're taught in a class, this is how you write. These are the rules of screenwriting. Then they go and they read Uncut Gems, and they say, wait a minute, I was told that wasn't allowed.
Oh no! When I started reading Lethal Weapon and all of Shane Black's stuff, I'm like, wait, this is not. Or Quentin. God forbid you read a Quentin script. Jesus.
Yeah, but Tarantino's scripts leap right off the page.
Oh Jesus, do they ever?
They are in your lap, slapping you around
as you're reading it. No, there's no question. No question.
So the book I'm writing, that's what it's dedicated to. The first half is like, here's the proper way. Here are, like, if you're a jazz musician, here are the scales. This is what you need to practice. Now, here's how we improvise. Here's how professional writers write. Here's how professional writers allow the reader, as they're reading, to see a movie come off the page. And the one thing that young writers mix up is that they think, okay, I want to give them that cinematic experience, therefore I'm going to describe everything that's in the scene. And that becomes overload, right? Because a reader who's reading a screenplay doesn't know your world, doesn't know your story. They're reading and they're finding the clues to what that story is about. What is important, what's not important. So if you have a character walk into an office and you describe absolutely everything in the office, it's a flat scene. Mm-hmm. You may be describing a lot, but it's flat and it's confusing because there's too much visual detail. If you expend less language on the environment and more language on and more flamboyant language on those things that are really important, then the reader gets that and holds that as an important thing. The envelope on the desk, right?
Which is because if you're putting the envelope on the desk is on an ornate wooden desk that's a scene. It looks like the one from The Godfather, and its weight is this, and it just starts going and going and going. You're just like, what am I supposed to focus my energies on here?
Precisely. And young writers love to write about, like, the light is streaming in through the window. Do we need to know that? Who cares? The DP will take care of that. Don't worry. And actually, that's another thing. now that you've got me talking, I think young writers are resistant to the idea of film being a collaborative art form. They want to control everything, and you simply can't control everything. They want to tell you how everybody is dressed, what their hair looks like, where the light is coming from, the color of the walls.
Camera moves.
The camera moves. The camera moves. It's like, no. Take it easy. Take all that stuff off your shoulders, and then tell your story. And then we'll get to exactly what you were talking about, Alex. It's clean. It's got energy. It's got the energy of a movie that's unfolding before your eyes. So it's clean. It's got energy, and the story jumps off the page, and the actions reveal.
Right.
What needs to be revealed.
I was reading the other day the script for Bound by the Wazowskis. This is the movie right before The Matrix. And in the script, they actually wrote, like, there was a very big love scene between two girls, and this is also late 90s when this is being made. So it's not as open as it is today in regards to that kind of stuff. And they go at the end of it, they go, and we're not gonna cut this scene. In the script, they're like, and we're not cutting the scene. In the screenplay.
That's radical. That's a radical thing to do.
Right.
You're reminding me of, I just read the script for First Man.
Okay. Yeah.
Chazelle. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, he takes a lot of liberties in that script, which is fun. But, when you have a track record and people know what you can do, you can take more liberties than when you're a beginning writer, for sure. But anyway, there's a scene in there where Neil Armstrong goes into the capsule for some Gemini liftoff. I can't remember the number of the Gemini liftoff. And it's a beautiful scene in the film where everything is shown through Neil Armstrong's point of view. And what he hears and what he sees, which is nothing, it's just like a little triangle of a window. The entire liftoff, which is super dangerous, is told through the image through this little triangle window. And he says in that scene, we see what Neil sees, we hear what he sees, and we're not fucking cutting away.
It's literally said that.
He literally says that in the, I don't know if I can say that on your
It's fine. It's fine. Okay.
Anyway, he literally writes that we're not fucking cutting away to an external shot or something. Anyway, so it's just very funny. He's like,
because he knew what was going to happen. He's going to go, oh, well, when can we get a wide shot on this? They're like, exactly. No, that's it. But he's also a writer-director, and he knows how he's going to execute it and so on. But he just wanted to make that clear as a fun thing to do. What was the script I was reading the other day? I was reading, I think it was Shane Black or Tarantino, and you start seeing some spelling errors in it. Spelling error and some even grammatical errors. And I always love young screenwriters who are like, well, I was reading a Shane Black script, and he had a couple of punctuation, and I'm like, he's Shane Black.
That's right.
If he wants to misspell something, no one cares because he's Shane Black or he's Quentin Tarantino or he's Chris Nolan. Like they are at a whole other place that you are not. They've established themselves, and when you're coming up, I promise you that True Romance and Natural Born Killers, which were the first two scripts that Tarantino sold, were immaculate.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason that you, if you're a young writer, the reason why you can't afford to make any mistakes in your script is because you lose the faith of the reader who doesn't know who you are. And so if they can't trust that your writing is in order, then when you do something in the script that is funky or whatever, or really super interesting, they're like, was that a mistake, or is this person in control of their language?
Right.
So you have to, I have a very good friend who's an A-list writer, and he was a former student of mine. And he would rather die than submit something with a mistake, even though he just sold a script for like $4 million, or $5 million, and one of the biggest deals in the last 10 years. And we worked on a project, and we sold. We wanted to write the scripts, but the people who bought it from us only wanted our treatments, and they wanted to write their own scripts because it was television. They have their writer's room already.
Sure.
They don't want to integrate new people. So we were happy, like, okay, bye. Wow, okay, bye. Pay us for not writing the script, fine. So they wrote the pilot, and they sent it to us just so we could give them some feedback on it. And there were like 5 typos in like the first 2 pages. And my friend Bill said, "Can you believe that?" I said, "Well, yeah, I can believe that. They have over 600 hours of television produced already. So what does it matter?"
Exactly. At that point, it doesn't matter. And yeah. I think that comparison to established people or even legends or masters as young screenwriters is rampant. I mean, like you said earlier, they're like, oh, Tarantino, and we keep using the same name, or Kaufman, or any of these screenwriters, and they compare themselves to it, and you can't. You need to find your own voice. You need to find your own path. Whatever they did, you can't follow that path. It's so interesting. When I was starting out in the business, I would analyze I would read every autobiography I could get my hands on filmmakers. Yeah. I would try to study the way they got into the business. So you're like, okay, so Robert Rodriguez made a $7,000 action movie. And all right, Clerks, okay, so he did this and he did that. Okay, great. Ed Burns, okay, he did this, this, and this. Spike Lee did this, this, and this. And you would start and like, okay, maybe I can get this way. And I was always trying to hack my way in. Yeah. And it took me years to realize you're like, that's their path that can never be replicated. Yeah. Ever, because of the timing of who they are and what they are. Like, when I had Richard Linklater on the show, I asked, do you think Slacker's gonna, if Slacker shows up today, do you think it finds an audience? And Rick's and straight up, like, does it find an audience? And Rick's like, probably not. Yeah. And I said the same thing to Ed Burns. I go, if Brothers McMullen shows up today, do you think you get it a theatrical and it makes $30 million off of a $30,000? Do you think that is going to happen? And he's like, absolutely not. They were a product of their time. Where in today's world they would probably be just thrown into the soup like everybody else. Yeah. Not that they don't have any talent, and not that the movies aren't great. It's just a different environment and a different audience as well.
That's true. But, I always do a few exercises with my students to help them, I guess the term, to use the term of Michael Rabiger, with whom I co-wrote a book, to find their own themes. Like, who are you? What are you interested in? What obsesses you? Right. What are the genres of film that you like, that you can be inspired by? But how is it? How do you make it yours? What are the things? Like I said, what are the things that obsess you? What are the things? Who are the people who are fascinating characters? Where are the places you've gone that you think this would be an awesome place for a film? A writer, like any other artist, has to find out what their unique contribution is. But getting back to reading scripts, when I finish my screenwriting 1 class, which is all about the shorts, I give my students a list of like 5 scripts that will take their language to the next level, not to copy them. And they're always quite different genres, and then they are also as contemporary as I can find.
So do they change, or can you give those 5 scripts out now, the names?
Sure, I can. I mean, I find these online. I just say, I just Google download PDF title, and you find it. As you know, I'm sure you know that when award season comes around, these
they all
scripts
pop out. Yeah, look, they're all available on bulletproofscreenwriting.tv.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll go look. Well, like Jeff Nichols' film Loving.
Mm-hmm. That was a beautiful movie. Yeah.
And the script is the same. It's a very elegant, very quiet, very powerful script. The language is super precise, and there's no flamboyance to it, but it just tells its story in very simple language, methodically, but really that accumulates power over time. Mm-hmm. The screenplays for Chernobyl are phenomenal.
Oh yeah, well Craig, yeah.
They're just perfectly written,
Yeah.
Jordan Peele's Get Out is another great script to read. Dee Reese, Mudbound is a little bit more flamboyant. It's a little bit more, really indicating shots and cuts, but it's powerful. You see the movie, you feel the movie. Like I said, book smart. I like to give students All Is Lost, which has no dialogue. And that's like, what is it? How long is All Is Lost? I think it's like 40 pages or something like that.
Right. Right.
Sideways.
Oh, another beautiful script. Yeah.
Great script. Deborah Granick's Leave No Trace is the simple script, elegant script, beautifully written, beautiful film, kind of a overlooked film, but I think it's a phenomenal film. So that's the kind of stuff I will give them.
Now, what advice would you give on writing great dialogue? Because dialogue is such a difficult thing to get the tone, to get the the energy of a character, and also how not to write on the nose, which is so it's like I love watching great television or great movies, and I'll just go, oh, I see where they just dropped off that she's been divorced for 5 years without saying, hey, Dad, how does it feel being divorced for 5 years? I don't know, son. It's pretty hard. As opposed to a look on the letter, like a look at the paperwork of, oh, I have to sign the divorce papers. No one ever says anything. Something subtle like that to get that information across. But how do you write great dialogue?
Well, there's the first thing you have to think about, and I'm going back to beginning writers. The first thing that big mistake that beginning writers make with dialogue is that they think they have to tell the story in dialogue. Because they don't trust yet that an audience will see an action and understand the inner life of a character who performs that action. They understand the motivation of somebody who does a particular action. They don't trust that yet. So they'll do the action, and then they'll do exactly what you just said. We'll see the divorce papers, and they'll write the dialogue, oh, I've got to sign the divorce papers. You don't need this to say it. We're seeing it, right? So that's the first thing.
Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell.
Exactly. Dialogue that's redundant kills your movie.
Oh, absolutely. It just stops the momentum. It stops the momentum completely.
The second thing is that there's, again, it's just people who don't trust that their movie that they're already telling their story is that there are many times when a look, a gesture, a glance will say exactly what dialogue needs to say. So the first, in terms of dialogue, the first step is to strip away all the unnecessary dialogue, and then strip away a little bit more dialogue than that. And then, you need to dig deeply into your character, and you have to say, so what is the purpose of this dialogue, or what does it reveal about my character? Not what does it tell about the story, but what is it going to reveal about the character? What kind of language would this person use? How many words would this person use? I mean, I think that Loving is a very interesting script in that sense, because he has two characters, especially the male lead, who is super taciturn, not particularly articulate, and doesn't talk about things much, right? Or First Man, we were just talking about First Man. Neil Armstrong is not somebody who talks about his feelings.
No, he does not.
He never would have been an astronaut. So you have to understand you know, the language your character uses, and how much language your character uses, and the fact that you have to really understand that they inhabit that story as in life, and so they wouldn't go, explaining things for people who don't know what's going on.
Right, and I always find it so irritating when writers add backstory in a very brutal way where they're just explaining it. I think the best example of writing backstory, or what's the word? It's completely escaping me when you have to tell exposition. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
Is James Cameron. James Cameron, when he wrote Terminator, I think he's still one of the most underrated writers of his generation. Yeah. He's not as a filmmaker, but as a writer. You read Alien script and you're just like, oh my God. One of the most perfect action scripts ever written. But if you read Terminator, there's so much exposition that has to be laid out because we all know what the Terminator mythology is now. But in 1984, nobody understood what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you've got exposition, write it in an action sequence. Write it in something. So he's literally explaining, Reese is explaining to Sarah Connor what's going on as they're being chased by the Terminator, writing, shooting, boom, I'm from this, boom, boom, boom. And this is what happens, boom, he's a machine, boom, he has flesh over his body, boom. It was all, but it's done like this, as opposed to them sitting down at coffee like, well, I'm from the past. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful technique. It really is.
Yeah. Well, with exposition is tough because what we do is we do narrative.
Right.
Narrative is the act of telling a story. Exposition is not the act of telling a story. Exposition is the act of explaining something, right? So that's why if you don't handle your exposition well, it puts the brakes on your story and it becomes uncomfortable. The first thing is you ask yourself, do I need this exposition? Think of Thelma and Louise. We never know what happened to Louise in Texas. We never know what happened to Jake is in Chinatown.
Right.
Do we need it? We don't need it. Maybe it's better in the minds of the audience. They can imagine what happened. So do I need it? Do I need all of it? Because sometimes you can pare it down a lot. Do I need all of it in a chunk, or can I pepper it throughout the script? And then, like you say, put it in a scene of action and tension, or comedy. That comedy, is like a spoonful of sugar that lets anything go down. And of course, motivate it. You can't have a scene with two lawyers, or one lawyer says to the other, my client's going to plead the fifth. You know what that means? That means he doesn't have to testify against himself. Of course, he knows what that means. So find a scene. The lawyer goes to the defendant's mother and says, I don't want you to worry. I'm going to have him plead the fifth. And she's like, what's that? Is that dangerous? What does that mean? It's okay. It's okay. Take it easy. It just means he doesn't have to testify against himself. And now there's a reason for exchanging that information.
Right, exactly, as opposed to it being the other way around. Do you know what that means? It's like, do we know what John Wick did prior to John Wick going crazy because they stole his car and killed his dog? Like, all we know is that when they say his name, it's like the boogeyman walking into the baddest MF guys in the world, the criminals of the world. They're like, wait a minute, John Wick? Yeah. Like, I just watched the movie. Did you watch Nobody?
Not yet, no.
It is wonderful. It was written by Derek, I forgot his last name, but he wrote John Wick. And you can sense the John Wick-esque-ness of him in there. And and they have scenes like that where someone's doing research on Saul. I can't remember his name. Better call Saul. Him, the main actor.
Bob Odenkirk.
Bob Odenkirk, thank you. And when the person sees it, they're like, yeah, don't pay me. I'm out of here. And that's how much of a badass he is. I was like, oh, that's so brilliant. But no one knows. And he says it, I think, at one moment. He just one sentence to explain who he was. And that's it. In the entire movie, he explains one sentence of who he was. And you're like, that's all you need. You don't need flashbacks. You don't need to see a scene of him being a badass. One thing. But I don't even think it's been explained yet what John Wick has done in the past. They just know and for 3 movies, you still don't know what John Wick did or why he's just renowned. I mean, everyone just knows he's a
something
badass.
Against the table. I don't know what.
No, he did something, and there's been some little things of like how he left, but the reason of how his legend became who he is has really never been explored very much. So it's sometimes better to leave it.
That's true, and I think that's really interesting. I haven't really thought about John Wick that much, but what would be interesting to look at John Wick is where do we get the sympathy for him? Where do we get we like him? We want him. We don't want him to die. And where is that located? Because
I'll tell you. I'll tell you why. We'll just go back to the first movie because now the second and third movie we already love John. John seems like he's trying to do the right thing. So he's trying to be a good guy. Secondly, they stole his car, which is a badass car, and that gets a certain demographic of the audience.
Yeah,
so you don't scratch a man's car. I mean, it's in Pulp Fiction. You don't do that. You don't mess with another man's vehicle. So there's that. And third, the oldest trick in the book, they killed his dog. Yeah. What do you want to do to establish a villain? Have him kick a dog.
Of course.
It's the oldest trick in the book for writers. So what do? They killed his dog.
Yeah.
And of course the villain is just such a dumbass. Yeah. On top, he's not even a badass. He's a dumb. Because if he was, so a perfect example, the guy who does all of this, and sorry for all the spoilers if you haven't seen John Wick, but this all happens in the first 15 minutes. The idiot who he doesn't know what he's doing. First of all, secondly, if that character would have been an absolute badass, it wouldn't have worked as well. It needed to be a complete buffoon, who he was, a complete, just egocentric, over-the-top buffoon who did all of this. It makes it all the sweeter of what's going. And then the dad is the real badass.
You see, you filled it in for me because I did not see the first John Wick. I missed the first John Wick. I picked it up because I watched the one where he fights Boban Marjanovic because I'm a basketball fan. So I was like, I got to catch that.
John Wick 1 honestly is, as far as action is concerned, it is such a well-written script. I mean, Keanu is Keanu. He is obviously Jesus. But no, but all seriousness though, that first film, there's a reason why there's so much love for that character that it spawned 2 and 3, and now they're going to do 4 and 5 back to back. And the thing is also that we feel for the character because he lost his wife. He's trying to turn a new leaf. He's trying to reinvent himself. He's trying to all things that check little boxes inside, it pull on certain strings of our heart that you normally don't see in an action hero, and that he's quiet. That's the other thing. He doesn't talk. He's a man of action. He has a little bit of dialogue. One of the best scenes in the first John Wick is after someone sent a hit squad for John Wick and burnt his house down, or about to burn his house down, or something like that. And he dispatches all of them. And then the cops show up. The cops. This is what's so beautiful about this movie. The cops show up, knock on the door, and the cop is there and goes, "Hey, John, how's the night going?" And then he looks inside, without blinking, he looks inside, he sees a dead body. He goes, "You working again, John?" He's like, "No, man, it's just an accident." "Okay, just checking," and walks back. Just walks backwards. It's like, have a good night, John. Like that mythology that they've created for that character is so wonderful that now there's a show. I know the showrunner of the show, and he's writing a show about the world that they created, that Derek was able to create. So it's just beautifully written, and look, we see action movies come and go, and we see action heroes come and go, and this is not a Jean-Claude Van Damme film or a Steven Seagal film. This is a well-written, well-performed, well-directed action. But that's but at the end of the day, it's about emotion. It's about emotion and connecting to that character, and it's not just about the spectacle. Spectacle's fun, but we've seen action before. It's his character that moves everything.
Yeah, but what's interesting is how little one needs to actually, because we're so used to genres and watching films, how little one needs to actually use for all of that to come in for the audience. And then they get to the other stuff. You know, we fill in a lot of stuff. And this is one of the other things about writing, and this is one of the things about using genre. You know, audiences have seen so much. They understand film noir, they understand westerns, they understand the tropes that are used, they understand the melodrama. That nowadays writers can use these genres as shorthands. Just a little hint of noir brings the whole genre and many of the issues or the themes of the genre into your movie. So we don't use them fully anymore. We just like a little shorthand, and it accents our films.
And like you watch movies like from the 70s, they had to do things so differently than now because there's been so much content from the moment of the 70s up until now. We're talking about 50 years that there's generations have been raised on watching movies again. And also in the 80s is when we got VHS. That changed the game. Now we could watch things 1,000 times again and again. So we're so much more, the audience is so much more educated, which is good and bad. Good because, like you said, you can use shorthand, but bad because now you're like, well, I got to come up with something that they haven't seen before.
Yeah.
You know.
The other thing too is that, you know, you have that generation of films that you're filmmakers that you're talking about, the Finchers and the Tarantinos and these people who are so film literate, who you know are so profoundly knowledgeable and they're incorporating all this stuff, and so it almost is like little master classes in every film. You know,
every scene's a master. You watch the opening scene of Social Network, and that's a master class in dialogue, in direction.
That's another script I give my students to read.
I mean, well, that's probably Sorkin's best script in my opinion, and he's written some doozies, but it's just such a tight film, and the way that Fincher, and it's probably Fincher's best, and I love Fight Club.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore Fight Club, and Seven. Seven is a masterpiece in his genre as well. But we could just geek out forever. Nick.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, so what's up next for you? What is the book you're writing?
Well, the book I'm writing is, I was mentioning it before, it's a screenwriting book. Really, it's like I said, it's not about drama, it's not about structure, it's not about character. Really, it's a style manual. Here's the proper way of writing a screenplay, and then here's the way professionals push, break the rules to, for dramatic effects. And here's what you can get away with.
That's a good angle.
It's mastering screenplay form and style is what it's called.
Okay.
So that's next up, and I'm also working on a couple of screenplays. Mm-hmm. Like I told you, me and a friend of mine just sold something to Sony. We just sold treatments for a series. Now they got it, so that sort of freed me up to work on some other projects.
That's awesome.
I have 2 screenplay projects I'm working on.
Very, very cool, man. And I'm going to ask you a couple questions I ask all my guests. What advice would you give a screenwriter wanting to break into the business today?
Oh, wow. That's I would say for a screenwriter, I would say write a lot, but I would find ways to get your work made, even if it's just, pulling together friends who are directors and crew, and get your stuff, see your writing finished, even if you're just posting it on the web, and also be flexible with the form that you are interested in, because writers these days, writing for television, if you're in a writing room, it's a different skill than if you are creating a television show or writing a feature film. It's a very different skill. Be prepared to write shorts, small shorts for YouTube. Be prepared to write for TV. We have to be a little bit more, writers need to be a little bit more sort of polymaths. They need to know a broader range of skill. And I would say, just keep knocking on doors. Just keep knocking on doors. It takes, it's always been like this. It takes tenacity. It really takes tenacity. And always maintain enthusiasm and energy and passion for your own work, because it can be tough and you can start to lose that. And no producer wants to hear somebody pitching a script that a writer's not particularly interested in.
It's about skill, experience, and luck. And luck has, from speaking to the people I've had the pleasure of speaking to, they always tell me, I was lucky. I was at the right place, right time, right script. But the point is, you can't put yourself in that position unless you're knocking on doors.
Yeah, but there's a quote in the world of chess, which is, the people who work the hardest are the luckiest.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If you keep knocking on those doors, it's like one day someone's going to open and go, where have you been? Here's $1 million.
Knock on doors. Meet people. Don't drop people. Seek out other talented people and stick to them.
Yep, absolutely. No question at all.
And the other thing about I mean, I'm not somebody who thinks that you have to go to film school, although film school offers a broad range of experiences in a more compressed form. Mm-hmm. And my first book I wrote basically, I had a friend who said, "You're writing us all out of a job. It's all there. Why do they need teachers anymore?" And that was exactly my goal with that book. Mm-hmm. But students, when they're in school, that's where you form the peer group that is going to be your first professional relationships out of school. And so you need to find those people you can work with and start collaborating with them as soon as possible. And don't let them go.
I agree with you 100%, Mick. Thank you so much for being on the show, my friend. I truly appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Continue the great work you're doing, brother.
All right. Take care, and it was a pleasure.